What is your initial reaction to this report from Bloomberg?
Well, if this is true, and I can't comment on specificity whether this is actually true or not for a number of reasons, but let's speak kind of generally. If this is true, this is the holy grail of hacking. This isn't, implementing software or implanting software and being able to gain access by that. They apparently did this in the manufacturing process, which makes it much, much harder to detect, nearly impossible to counter. And it opens every one of us up, whether it's privacy issues, whether it's commerce, whether it's banking, or worst of all, national security implications. This is a very serious concern. And by the way, the fact we discovered this doesn't mean, oh good, man, we dodged a bullet. It's not like this is the only effort that China has made. We have to, as you just said, we have to be constantly on guard and constantly on the defensive about this.
The top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, has said he's looking to get more information about how this might have happened from U.S. intelligence agencies. How might you go about doing that, getting that information?
Well, we can have conversations with them, but I got to tell you, this isn't something new to us. It's not like we woke up this morning and go, oh my gosh, never thought about this. We ought to check into it. It's something we've been very diligent about and very aggressive in trying to pursue this type of information and making sure that we are in the right position. And by the way, the good news is that this administration has been much more proactive and much more aggressive in putting ourselves in a position where we can defend about this. And that's one of the arguments I've been making for a while. The previous administration was far too willing to just kind of suffer these hacks and not really have any retribution or have any price to be paid. And I just think it encouraged it, and it just made it too easy for our adversaries to say, well, let's go poke and prod and plant and see what we can do. But we have to be more aggressive in countering this. China should pay a price for having done this. And again, by the way, it's not the only thing that China is doing that is making it difficult for us to have a positive relationship with them. Look at the South China Sea. Look at any number of things that we should be on guard with regarding China.
What do you believe is the price China should pay for this?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things. One of them should be that it should be well known and advertised that they are doing this. And so manufacturers who have moved so much of their manufacturing to China, but for economic reasons, would then consider there are other concerns that we would have to weigh that against. Maybe it's not smart to open up a new chip manufacturing facility in China. Maybe we should do it in Vietnam or maybe, hopefully, here in the United States. So I think that would be the first thing that I would hold them accountable for is the economic impacts of it. But there's more than that as well, which is why some of our negotiations regarding trade and sanctions is an important part of this conversation.
So what action do you believe the committee should take?
Well, the first thing is to be aware of it, obviously, as Mr. Schiff has said, and as I just said to you, it's not the first time we've considered this, to continue to dive into it as best we can to make the American people aware, especially decision makers, business and government decision makers. I mean, my heavens, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that potentially this chip that has been hacked in a very, very dangerous way, that those servers may find themselves as part of a contract to provide cloud computing for the Pentagon or for the CIA. And we know that that's, if it hasn't been done, it's certainly a possibility. And that's the kind of thing that the committee would be diving into and just demanding to know, the implications of that.
Do you want to hear from the companies? Do you want to hear from Apple and Amazon and Supermicro?
Well, yeah, of course we would. I mean, we can't understand this without talking to the manufacturing and talking to those who are distributing these products. And we don't want to do it with a pointing finger. It's not like we want to go with a hammer on their head and condemn them, especially before we really understand what happened. And by the way, it's not just Apple and Amazon. The distributor and the manufacturer of this particular server has been widely disseminated, according to reports, once again, and something more than 30 manufacturers have this type of equipment. But we can't understand the problem, at least not in its entirety, without talking to the manufacturers and those who are on the commercial side, not just the government side. We really got to look at both.
Now, since we're in the midst of the Muller investigation, there's a lot of talk about how big a threat Russia is. Do you believe China is a bigger threat than Russia?
Well, it depends on what you mean by threat, actually. I mean, when it comes to, if you want to look backward in our 2016 election, our focus was clearly on Russia, and it should have been on Russia, and needs to continue to be. But again, I've argued for a couple of years, we're turning a blind eye sometimes when we focus on only one side of the world, and that's towards Russia, because China has proven they're not a trusted partner and they're not a trusted friend. And if you were to ask me strategically, looking at the next generation, our children, and the challenges they're going to face, I think I could argue pretty convincingly that China is the greatest threat that we face in a very strategic sense.
Vice President Mike Pence made a speech yesterday about his concerns around China. Take a quick listen to what he had to say.
Beijing has mobilized covert actors, front groups, and propaganda outlets to shift Americans' perception of Chinese policy. As a senior career member of our intelligence community told me just this week, what the Russians are doing pales in comparison to what China is doing across this country.
Would you go that far, Congressman, that it pales in comparison to what China is doing?
Well, I think the Vice President is right, and whether I would use the word pale or maybe something a little softer modifier than that, I don't know, but what he said is exactly true. I mean, we have instances where China is taking out advertisements in the middle of our country, in the heartland, hoping to affect public policy and public perception. Look at the Confucianism centers. There's hundreds of them, more than 500 of them around the United States that we know is used as a front for Chinese intelligence and for Chinese manipulation of commerce and government. Look at how they intimidate their neighbors so that they don't take a pro-U.S. stand. I mean, I could keep going. The list is long. There's no question that what the Vice President has indicated there is absolutely true, which is why, going back to what I said previously, strategically, I think they're the greatest threat that we're going to have to face and encounter. And I don't think we've had that conversation yet where we've convinced most Americans that that is true.
On the issue of the Mueller investigation, got to ask you, do you believe that Robert Mueller is conducting a fair investigation and that the president should sit down with him with no strings attached?
Well, you know, I've always supported the Mueller investigation from the very beginning. I've always said as well, I hope he does it thoroughly, but does it as quickly as possible. I think for the sake of these individuals who have been accused, that in fairness to them, they need to have their name cleared if they're innocent. I think primarily for the benefit of the American people, I hope he does it quickly so that we can get these answers. But I support Mr. Mueller in his investigation, and I want him to go forward.